Welcome to Pencils Down, a Finalis podcast. This is a show for listeners wanting to learn more about the ins and outs of the private securities brokerage landscape. Each episode will feature insightful conversations with the world's leading investment bankers, placement agents, capital providers, startup CEOs, and more. And with that, let's get into the show. All right, we are on here with Marty Teevan from Sheehan Finance. Marty, it is a pleasure to have you on here on the Pencils Down podcast.
Thank you, Fed. I've been looking forward to this.
Likewise. So I thought I'd kick things off simply by asking you to share a little bit about your background. I always find it fascinating to hear, what was the story arc that ultimately led you to launch your own platform, which is Sheehan Finance.
Yep. Well, I would say, I've been very fortunate to work with a lot of talented people and some mentors over the years. And, I'm not going to date myself, but I've been in the markets for 3 decades. My career started in the sort of boutique model, value add, capital light sales and trading, and figuring out how to add value to the client base. I started in mortgages. I moved to high yield, US high yield. And, you learn a lot in that model, not having the capital to lead with. And I think it was a great way to learn. I then moved on. I went to London at the start of the very early days of the European high yield market. I was with ING and starting their leverage finance platform in Europe. And that was where I got into more of the heavy market making. Came back, got into the capital intensive portfolio management, and over the last 10 years, I've kind of come full circle back to the value add model. And obviously, with all the dynamics taking place with the investment banking world, there's been a fair amount of migration, and quite frankly, this is I've been quite happy since I've gotten on your platform.
And so just to dive in a little bit more on this notion of, kind of a migration, are you referring specifically to a migration capital markets professionals such as yourself that choose to launch your own independent boutique?
Yes. I mean, I think if you look at the broad landscape, a number of the larger firms, there continues to be upheaval and change. And, as I've experienced at the larger firms, not only do you have to do well, your group has to do well, your division has to do well, your firm has to do well. And so those have to be aligned in order to get paid appropriately. Moving to the entrepreneurial model that we have, there's no corporate sort of meetings and all that goes into working for a big bank, and the payouts very straight up. And this Finalis, quite frankly, I'm very happy to be on this platform, which enables business and provides all the infrastructure rather than having to work through the layers at a larger institution.
What's interesting, I was having a conversation with Damien Entrikin, our head of product, yesterday on this, but the model has kind of gotten inverted over the last several decades, where it used to be that people worked for organizations. But now the model has gotten inverted, where it's not necessarily that organizations are necessarily filled with people, but people have an organization that serves them, right?
Right.
And that inversion is a direct consequence of technology, where it's easier than ever before to launch a website, to host a conference call on Zoom, and run your business now with enabling platforms like Finalis on the basis of your own brand equity in the marketplace, where you're exercising your own brand and you're doing business the way you want to do business, and you're not necessarily hamstrung by a larger corporation and all of the politics that comes along with that.
I would completely agree. Having worked at some big firms, UBS, Goldman Sachs, etc. At those points, it felt like, yes, you're your own person, but you're part of a much bigger brand and platform, and it does kind of matter, what it says on your business card, right? Whereas here, and in this model, the the entrepreneurial model, it's very open as to how you want to, run your business and go about, winning new business.
Right. Yeah, it's so interesting. Of course, there's obviously pros and cons, and we might get into that a little bit in the sense that obviously the brand equity of an ING, which has been around for a few hundred years, is going to vary significantly from the brand equity that you yourself might exercise on the basis of your own relationships. And just wanted to spend a minute on that. What has your experience been making that transition as it relates to leveraging a brand of a large bulge bracket, right? In the case of an ING, versus having to exercise your own brand equity in the market.
I think it's been quite interesting. Obviously ING at the time in Europe, they were trying to build out a global investment bank. They pulled the plug on that, a year and a half into a 3-year plan. In essence, that's where my relationship started, and I've always been client facing, regardless of whether it's sales and trading or now in a capital markets and corporate advisory and fundraising role. But that's you are your reputation, and as we've seen over time, that reputation is at risk with one bad move, and so yes, it's definitely the case. Taking that all that goodwill that you've brought up over the years, and working to the best of my ability on the client's behalf, that is translates into what I'm doing today.
Excellent. Yeah, and what's interesting there as well that I would be very curious to get your thoughts is when you make a transition like this, you're not necessarily sitting at a desk at a large bulge bracket where that bulge bracket in many ways is a bulwark facing kind of all of the tides of change that are happening in the economy and in the broader, economic or political landscape. And over this period of time, over the last 2 years since you launched Sheehan Finance, you've seen effectively a very interesting period in the global capital markets. And just be curious to get your perspective on all of the changes that you've seen take place in the global capital markets since you launched the platform, and how has it impacted you and your business?
Clearly there's been a lot of change, starting with we had COVID, which came out of the blue, caught everyone by surprise. Obviously that led into work from home, which quite frankly I was surprised about how a lot of these roles, such as sales trading on the equity side, that they could actually translate to working from home. I think a lot of organizations were able to be fairly nimble, and adjust quickly. Last spring we've had the Ukraine conflict, um, and then that led right into the fintech, sort of problems. Which so it's been very interesting. I think I like dislocation, which is leads to volatility, and which ultimately leads to opportunity. And markets have become quite more real, more subjective in a lot of cases. Um, in a lot of asset classes. So there's clearly this brings a lot of opportunity.
And how have you seen those opportunities become manifest within the context of Sheehan Finance?
I think the key is for a lot of and obviously the fund management business has been changing and evolving very quickly. You have these big private equity platforms that are rolling into significant putting significant resources and gathering assets such as private credit. And the issue historically has been, for a lot of these big funds, has been sourcing. And sourcing, is very difficult. It's competitive, and a lot of these hedge funds and opportunity funds have hired their own internal sourcers. So I think the beauty of this model is that, and the collaboration that Finalis presents. If I bring a deal to my key clients and it's not heavily shopped, it's not, and it's quality deal. Obviously, I'm very selective on what I'm going to show my clients and what I'm going to spend my time on. But sourcing is historically a big problem. I think this model solves a lot of those issues, and it's a win for myself. It's a win for the client, and obviously for Finalis.
Makes a ton of sense, and I love to hear that, obviously, because it's a strong validation of the journey that we've been on since launching the platform. To dive a little deeper into Sheehan Finance in particular, I was curious to get your perspective on the thesis that you were chasing in the context of launching your own platform, whether it was an industry thesis. We were talking about the winds of change a little earlier. I'm curious just to hear your perspective on the opportunities that you saw that you and Sheehan Finance were uniquely situated to capitalize on.
Number one, as I mentioned, I've always been client focused. So I've been trying to, and what ultimately led me to the formation was that trying to optimize those relationships that I've built, and all the goodwill that I've built over the last 10, 20 years. And so a lot of the relationships date back to my time in Europe and have, persisted since. I've grown with a number of those individuals, and they've become personal friends. And it's and obviously there's a real meaning of trust, that everybody's working and being very. I've always been very transparent.
Outstanding. Yeah. And I think that ultimately is a reflection on why this trend is actually happening. Because at the end of the day, this is a relationship business. And what people value is that relationship. One of the things that I've observed is, it's more important for that CEO to know that they can trust Marty as opposed to, oh, we can trust the bank that Marty happens to be affiliated with.
Right. In a lot I won't name names, but it's been the other way around, right? Where they, there's been, I've been brought in to sort of fix some, client facing customer issues, right? And sort of repair those relationships. And, it's all based on trust and, and value add, right? I mean, everybody's got to figure out how to be most productive and how to allocate their time. And in that case, clients are king, right?
Yes, absolutely. I was just curious because I noticed on your website in preparing for this call the fact that it states that one of your focus areas is artificial intelligence. And obviously, you'd have to have been living under a rock to not notice some of the remarkable developments with OpenAI and ChatGPT that have taken the tech world by storm over the course of the last several months. I'm just curious, Marty, how has Sheehan Finance been able to capitalize on that development in particular? And on this incredibly accelerated adoption of consumer behavior and even frankly corporate behavior in adopting those new technologies.
Well, I mean, I would say for me, this has been a tremendous learning opportunity and coming up the curve. Starting with financial technology and now, as you mentioned, artificial intelligence. I would say that I am a consumer of information when it comes to these new areas that I haven't, that I'm learning about. I'm a continuous learner. So I would say, the first real example has been I've been working with a company called Mind Fund Technologies, which has an artificial intelligence driven digital twinning platform. And when I first started working with them last year, the sort of projections have rolled forward massively, and it's a smaller raise. It's a $3 million raise. That being said, that's a little bit different for me also, is working on these smaller situations. But as I mentioned, I'm very choosy about who I work with, and I believe in it. I believe in the business, and I've been, as a result of learning about it, I still have a lot to learn, but that's where I'm coming out. It's not only about, as I mentioned, the financial technology, artificial intelligence. Another mandate I'm working on is a company called Sly Beverages, which is a new vertical in the ultra competitive beverage market. It's a health drink that is focused on the massive gaming market. So I've also learned about a lot about that. It's a blend of consumer beverages, health and wellness, formed by two doctors here in Phoenix. So that's another area I've been learning about. If you look at the high yield market traditionally, it's been completely focused on capital intensive industries such as TMT and energy. Now there's been migration of deals to fund this new economy.
It's so interesting. I thought we might switch gears and talk a little bit about your role vis-a-vis the deal flow product that we've launched, and specifically the Finalis Marketplace. I think you have the distinction of really being one of the OG users of the marketplace environment that Finalis has built, and you've been very active on it. You've had multiple interactions, and I know that you are actively engaged and in a number of different conversations around the formation of syndicates through the platform. And I'd just be curious to understand what your experience specifically has been like, and where do you see the opportunity in that sort of a collaborative environment enabled by the Finalis software?
Kudos to you and your team, Fed. But it's been a wonderful process of onboarding and then getting ramped up and helping the firm grow. Finalis offers all the infrastructure that a banker needs, and support. Support's a big thing, a big factor. I've always been very collaborative and cross product, cross roles, cross seniority, both on the investment banking side and also on the buy side. And so, the collaboration, cross product and function is very important to me, given that's my how I've grown up, and that's how I conduct myself. And I have high expectations from my clients, and I have high expectations, to the similar expectations to people that I joined forces with. So, in this case, as I mentioned, I have those two deals I just mentioned on the marketplace. I have another um, pretty significant um, transaction in the project finance space, which, by the way, was which started as an introduction in between the company side banker and myself. So I've been fortunate in that way. I would say, there's a very robust network, which, I believe the firm is really tapping into, and everyone's growing together.
Yeah, I thought we might kind of connect that observation to what we were talking earlier about this inversion, right? Where instead of people working at a organization, people have organizations. And I think that's one of the things that the deal flow product is really trying to tap into is this notion of virtual organizations that can form dynamically around opportunities. And in achieving that, an investment banker such as yourself is in a position to have all of the benefits of freedom, autonomy, creativity, know-how, while at the same time leveraging the collective wisdom, relationships, and opportunity sets that a platform like Finalis might be able to facilitate. And I just, since you've been around the block and back, I'm just curious to get your perspective on, you know, this kind of a transition, starting from a larger investment bank environment and now over to, obviously having your own independent platform, but leveraging those kinds of capabilities through a business like Finalis.
I think you hit it spot on. I think I've got a pretty unique perspective, having been, at starting in the boutique firm as a firm called Wertheim Schroeder, which was absorbed by Citigroup Solomon, and then the big lumbering European bank, quite frankly, and then obviously these premier investment banks, and then rolling back to the more boutique entrepreneurial approaches. So I've had I've tried to use everything that I've experienced and learned, to sort of optimize where I devote my time, efforts, and approach. I think this is the new model. I think do as the factors that I mentioned earlier, the moons have to be aligned to get compensated appropriately, and there's at the big banks, and obviously as we've seen, I don't think we've had a year in a long time that everything has gone incredibly smoothly, or as planned. So I would say this independent model and the platform that you've set up to facilitate all these transactions is really exciting, and I think the firm Finalis is executing it in very grand fashion, and I think the firm is uniquely positioned. Quite frankly, I've seen some other similar platforms. And Fed, by the way, I promise this is not because I'm speaking with you. I really had a great experience with you and your team. There's tremendous resources from a technology perspective, from a support perspective. With the everyone I have worked with from day one. I think there's a lot of robust infrastructure that Finalis has built out. Compliance and the regulatory infrastructure and resources that the firm provides are incredibly important and very efficient. And everybody that I've dealt with has been incredibly responsive. Let's face it, the marketplace, as far as I can tell, is cutting edge. I think there's about 650 deals on there, and you can sort them, and then the introductions, everything's anonymous, and you arrange a meeting is through the platform, and see if there's a fit. And so I think it's interesting because whereas it's hard to affect change in these larger organizations in this model where everything is primarily success based, there's a constant focus on innovation and improvement and growth and how to make it happen versus what hoops you have to jump through in order to get something approved. So I think the firm is obviously very open to ideas and feedback. I think the I just saw we've expanded internationally, and adding on firms and from that perspective. But there's a high level of professionalism, and which is what I expect. And the firm's focus on fostering and encouraging business and collaboration. So I'm very proud to be an evangelist for the firm.
Well, thank you so much, Marty. That was incredibly gracious. And, I could say, kind of speaking for Finalis, that we're thrilled to be partners with you. We feel fortunate to be able to partner with you and many, many others within the Finalis ecosystem, because ultimately, I think that the value that we're building is more than the sum of its parts. I think it's an exponential relationship of the magic that can happen when like-minded professionals come together in a collaborative fashion to grow the pie as opposed to divide what exists. And so that's very much the spirit with which we're going to continue to build the firm. Share a little bit for the listeners around what you and your plans are in the remaining 3 quarters here of 2023.
Obviously, each of the last calendar years has been incredibly interesting. From my standpoint, I've identified 3 focus areas. Number one being establishing a merchant banking platform and a side pocket to invest along with these founders that I'm working with. As I mentioned, I believe in the companies. I try to be pretty selective about who I choose to work with. A lot of these companies that I work with, tend to have it's a meaningful opportunity for everyone. So I would be very interested in starting a fund like that. And secondly, I think the rescue area and sort of recovery funds could be an interesting vantage point, given that if you look at the venture space and these early stage companies, a lot of them, they were out of money as of Thursday, a couple Thursdays ago, when Silicon Valley Bank looked like it was going to completely unravel. And I was lucky enough to be at a venture fund here in Phoenix and speaking with the founder just coincidentally on that Thursday afternoon. And I saw the incoming panicked calls from founders and the portfolio company management, and on what to do. And I think the days of the incremental valuation rocketing higher without any real change, those days are behind us, at least for the moment. And now these companies are going to have to revisit their planning and growth, and being able to grow into their capital structure. And keep in mind, if these companies need new money, the original investors may, if they don't participate, they could get crammed down completely. or to some extent. So I think that that's a real opportunity as far as looking at a recovery or rescue fund platform, and in general, I think work on bigger deals. I think there's a real opportunity here at on this platform to work on pretty sizable transactions, and keeping the eye on the ball as far as being success based, but the collaboration is really key. And I think we're well positioned as a platform to really take advantage of that.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Marty. And I can just say, for Finalis, what we're going to be very focused on in 2023 and beyond is really into turning Finalis into a true revenue center for you. And we're going to be laser focused on that, because I think that is the true opportunity that's unfurling ahead of us. So we're going to be relentlessly focused on identifying all the ways in which we can deliver monetizable opportunities to you. And so with that, very excited to have had the opportunity to speak with you here, Marty. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Pencils Down podcast. And more importantly, thank you so much for your partnership over the last number of months as we've been building out this incredible platform together.
As I said, Fed, I'm very happy to be part of this platform and helping it grow. And I appreciate the opportunity here to discuss what I'm doing here at Sheehan Finance.
Thank you so much. Speak soon.
Thank you.
Finalis is a broker-dealer platform with everything that M&A advisors, investment bankers, and placement agents need to succeed. We deliver a broker-in-a-box regulatory affiliation solution, replete with tech-enabled compliance, research and analytics, deal lifecycle management tools, and a first-of-its-kind deal marketplace. Learn more at www.finalis.com. You've been listening to Pencils Down, a Finalis podcast. Keep connected with us by subscribing to the show on your favorite podcast player. If you like what you've heard, please rate the show. That helps us keep covering the latest in the private securities brokerage landscape. Thanks for listening. Until next time.